Hey, this is the First Year's Teaching Podcast with Justin Seymour, Episode 8, Classes in Session. Hey, welcome back to the First Year's Teaching Podcast. Today I'm extremely excited because today's episode is really what this show is all about. Today, for the first time, I have two guests, and they're both actually classroom teachers. Unlike other episodes where we've had professional developers, a journalist, or PhDs who have told us things we can learn from them, we actually have two teachers that are still in the classroom. But these aren't just any ordinary teachers. With me today is Madeline and Katherine Whitaker. They'll tell you a little bit more about their background, but they have recently co-authored a new book called The First Year with their father, whose name some of you may recognize. His name's Dr. Todd Whitaker. If not, Dr. Whitaker is actually the author of over 40 publications, including What Great Teachers Do Differently and What Great Principals Do Differently. He has a huge following of readers among school administrators, so you should certainly get familiar with his work if you can. But today, Madeline and Katherine are going to walk us through some of the most important things about your first year of teaching. I highly recommend picking up their book on Amazon or at Barnes & Noble. And remember, it's called The First Year. And the link to that will be in the show notes. Also, reach out to them on Twitter. Their handles will be in the show notes, and they mention them also at the end of the episode. Today, we discuss topics from classroom management to relationship building, setting up procedures and expectations, and things to think about in terms of relationships with other teachers and administrators when you first start teaching, and a lot more than that also. Many of the things that they cover is also covered in our free ebook, which you can get on our website under the resources tab, which will show a link to the ebook. It's really simple. You just go there and you'll put your email in, and a download link will appear at the bottom of the page, and you'll get that for free. And I recommend that free resource as perhaps a warm-up to Katherine and Madeline's book, The First Year, which goes much more into detail, much more in depth on many things, including classroom management. So without further ado, please enjoy this conversation with Madeline and Katherine Whitaker. Hi, thanks for coming on the show, guys.
Thanks for having us. We're excited.
Yes, we are.
Awesome. So I've got Katherine and Madeline Whitaker, and for the people who are listening, they don't know this, but we've actually recorded this episode already once, and then due to some technical problems, you guys were nice enough to come back on and spend more time redoing this, because what we did last time I honestly think was amazing. It was great, and it's everything that this website's about, and you guys gave so much great advice. I had to have you guys come back because I know that people would want to hear it. So, but before we jump into anything that we did last time or any of the other questions, let's talk about your guys' background a little bit. Let's tell us what you guys do. Katherine, you want to start?
Yeah, I'll go first. I just finished my fourth year of teaching. I'm a secondary math teacher. I taught 8th grade math for 3 years, and then switched to a different school district and taught high school math. I've taught high school math for 1 year. So it was kind of like my first year all over again this year. And then I will be done with my master's in educational leadership July 14th. I defend my portfolio. So I'm excited.
Congrats on that.
Thank you.
And Madeline, how about you?
Yes, I just finished my second year of teaching, and like Katherine did last year, I'll be moving to a new district, or I'll be moving over the summer, and so I'll kind of have my first year over again, which I'm excited about. And I teach third grade, so this will be my third year in third grade. And just like Katherine, I'll be finishing my master's in educational leadership in July as well.
I feel like that's so quick to get your master's. 2 years. You went right in from the beginning, didn't you?
Yes, yeah.
Her program was also an intensive, I think, 1 year program,
wow.
right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah.
That's pretty intense. So you guys both are obviously the daughters of Dr. Todd Whitaker, and he's the third author of you guys all three worked together to write a book called The First Year. Why did and which is about the first year of teaching, and why did you guys decide to write this book?
I think we really just wanted to help people going into their first year of teaching. My sister and I had totally different practicum experiences and undergrad experiences, and we wanted to be able to help fill any gaps for people or just reiterate the things that they may have forgotten during those years, and just kind of help people get off to the right foot during the first year.
Yeah, and I think we also wanted to provide a handbook that really focused on the main things that will really heavily affect your first year of teaching. Because there's a lot of tips and tricks lots of people can give, but we wanted to give which are super helpful. And I use lots of people's tips and tricks during my first year, but we wanted a book just to be about the things that we found to be the most influential during your first year of teaching.
Yeah, I agree. There's like a certain set of things that is really important. And I think, when I read through your book, that obviously it hits most of those things. And we'll talk about those are here in a second. But Katherine, you said that you guys had kind of a different experience in your in your student teaching, I would assume, your student teaching experience. Could you describe some of the differences that you had, maybe things that you didn't learn, maybe that you wish you would have learned?
I just think our undergrad experiences were different. I, for example, never had a class on classroom management when I went through my undergrad. I remember in my 4 years, we talked about classroom management one day for 1 hour. And that was all I had on classroom management. And then I had two awesome teachers that I worked with when I was student teaching, but I didn't meet up with them till January. So I missed, August, September, October, November, December while they're setting up their structures and when they're introducing their procedures. And so I just never saw how anyone did that. And I wanted to help people fill those gaps. That was a gap for me. And I saw it in my first year.
And Madeline, how about you? What was your student teaching experience like, or your undergrad experience like compared to Katherine's?
I don't know if it was because I went to a different university or because I'm elementary and she's secondary. I was grateful because I feel like my program, I took a whole semester long class about classroom management, and we focused a lot on, teaching, how to make your lessons effective, how to make them engaging. And although I think, it's impossible to have any undergrad program 100% prepare you for what teaching is really going to be like, I appreciated how comprehensive mine was able to be.
Yeah. Did either of you do any, we didn't talk about this last time, I apologize, but were either of you in like an urban setting when you did your student teaching?
She was.
Yeah, I was. Mm-hmm.
How do you feel like that affected you?
I think I don't know. I think it really, really helped me, but I also think because I went from a really, really urban setting to still an urban setting, but not in like a huge city. And so maybe it just helped me see the reality of what my first year was going to be like. And so it really forced me to be extremely, extremely, extremely prepared, especially in classroom management and setting up procedures and rules. And so maybe that was also something that helped me, not just my undergrad program, but the fact that I student taught in an urban setting.
Yeah, and I totally 100% agree. I graduated from IUPUI, and their total focus is urban education. And I never left an urban school. I grew up and went to a rural school. I don't know, what kind of school did you guys, I know we didn't talk about this last time, but this is stuff that I'm actually kind of interested in now that we get into it. Did you guys grow up in an urban school, or did you go to a more rural or suburban area?
I would say a little bit more suburban. It was a larger high school. We had 2,000 in the high school.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't like a suburb of a big city. It was kind of like a 50,000 person town in the middle of wherever. Yeah.
Right. Same. Well, actually, I didn't even go to a suburban school. I went to a very rural school. We had a really small school. We had 7 through 12 all in the same building, and it was less than 1,000 kids.
Okay.
So,
gotcha.
That's where I went to high school. And my next experience in a school was immediately going to an urban school in Indianapolis. And I am extremely grateful and thankful for that experience. While it was probably one of the most challenging experiences I've ever had, I think it made me a substantially better teacher, and I've written about this on our site and stuff too, about how critical. I think that's such an important experience. I think teachers should experience teaching in an urban setting. And when I came into my first year, we had a good friend of mine who started working at the same school in the same year that I did, and he had never had that experience. And my school we're not an urban school. We're in a small town, but we have almost a very strange urban demographic. And he really struggled. Like, he was really struggling with that experience because we had a lot of the same problems that a lot of urban schools have. And he was really struggling with it. And I said, hey, man, like, this is nothing compared to what you would have if you were at a school like, like downtown Indianapolis or Chicago. It's just not the same. Even though we have a lot of the same problems, it's not even comparable. So it's almost like, forging you in the fire if you're in an urban school, I think, in some sense. To prepare you for like the classroom management stuff, like you said, Catherine. So speaking of that, sorry to I just want to share that story because I think that's an interesting. I think anyone that has the opportunity in their undergrad experience to be in an urban school, they should take it, even if they don't necessarily want to teach in an urban school. I think they should take it and try to do it if they can, because
I think all experiences make you a more well-rounded educator. I think the more that you can interact with all types of people, the better it makes you as a teacher.
Yeah, undoubtedly. And so let's talk about some of the topics that you cover in the book, because you said you picked the topics that you thought were most important. What's the most important to new teachers?
I think I don't know if we would agree on this. I would say classroom management, but Madeline?
I would say there are lots of extremely stressful things that come into teaching, but if you do not have a handle on classroom management, research shows and personal experience shows and conversations show that's the true make or break for the majority of teachers is classroom management. And I think it's a huge thing that I think it's possibly for most first year teachers, the thing that they are most nervous about is what happens in those moments when your first student doesn't do what you ask them to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I agree. So classroom management, I just want to kind of create a list for people. So classroom management, I agree. Most people have said at any conference I've been at or any other new teachers I've talked to, they say classroom management is where I really struggle. What other topics did you guys cover in the book that you thought were really important?
We talked about, we touch on lesson planning, and obviously, we don't go into giving you, you should use this lesson plan guide or anything like that, but we kind of help you see what lesson planning is. The way that you can make it easy for you, but also, or easier, it'll be tough, easier for you, but also still working towards effective. And then another important part is when we talk about your relationships with people in your school and how do you navigate your new team, your coworkers, your boss, just this new situation you're thrown in.
And your students, I think we talk about how to build them, how to maintain them, and how to mend them. And I think that's really important to know how to do all three of those things.
Does that go into the relationships category, would you say?
Yes.
Okay. So I've got a list of three major things here, and that is classroom management, the lesson planning, and then maintaining and building relationships in the school that you're in. And I don't think anyone that's ever been in education can deny that those three are not only probably the most important in your first year, but probably throughout the rest of your teaching career.
Right.
So, but in your first year, in your second year, even those are really, really critical and really stressful things to deal with, I think, for most people. So let's break the topics down for people. One of the first things you start talking about in the book is structures and procedures to have in the classroom. If you were going to advise, let's say you were going to be a consultant to a new teacher has you at their disposal. Okay. And they come to you and say, okay, how should I structure my classroom? I'm confused on this and I don't know really what to do. Where's the first place you would start?
I feel like the first place you would start is first, like if I was just talking face to face to a first year teacher, I would want to understand what situation are they coming from? Are they elementary? Are they middle school? Are they high school? How big will their class sizes be? Like I always start with, okay, I want to picture the classroom. And
can we go into their classroom?
Yeah, of course.
Help them, just start with what you can see. Start with, if it's the summer before, first you need to make sure your classroom is functional and welcoming. And this is kind of the flow that we use in the book as well. First, you just need to make sure that your furniture is in place, your materials are accessible, etc.
Well, let's bounce back. No, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but let's bounce back and forth because, like you said, I think that's really important to understand. Like, what's the situation the teacher's in? Is it elementary? Is it high school? And since you're both at different levels, one of you are elementary and one of you at the high school level, I can use you guys as case studies. Right? So let's start, Madeline, with you at the elementary level. So you've got an elementary classroom, and this elementary school new teacher says, how do I go about structuring my class? What kind of advice would you give them?
Well, first I need to know, are they talking about structuring like physical space, or are they talking about structuring like procedures or rules? Like what? First I'd have to figure out what exactly they're...
Let's talk about structuring the physical space of the room first.
Okay. And so first I would ask them what, do you have desks? Do you have tables? Are they round? Are they long? How many students will they have? And then be like, okay, how can you place these tables and desks or whatever you're going to use in a way that makes you feel comfortable, that makes you feel like you will be able to have control from the moment they walk in. And then also once they decide what they feel most comfortable with, then that's when you start working through, okay, where do we need to put the papers? Where does the crowns go? Where do the scissors go? How can we make sure that all of these are available? But then even think, do you really want all the crayons, sitting at their desk when they walk in? Is that the best idea? Or do you want to have them off to a shelf, and so you can get them out maybe when you've already talked about that procedure? And so kind of work with the big stuff first and then get smaller and smaller with the physical items.
Mm-hmm. And Katherine, how about you? How about room structure for you as a high school teacher? And I know we'll get into this a little bit later because I know you talked about using the reset button last time, and we'll talk about that. How would you tell a new high school teacher to go about structuring the physical layout of their room?
I would want to know what they envision doing every day, because there are so many different subjects that are taught at the middle school and high school level. I'd want to know, if they're social studies, okay, what do you envision doing every day? Do you envision a bunch of group work? Do you envision lectures? Do you envision showing a movie clips? Like what's your vision for most every day? And then how can we make that come to fruition in a way that is successful for the teacher and also the students?
As a math teacher, what have you chosen to do with the physical layout of your room, both the desks and where you place things and stuff like that?
Yeah. So I had desks for 2 years. I had tables my third year, and now I'm back to desks. I always start the year out with my desks in rows. Always, no matter what I'm doing, no matter what my final goal is for my students. I always start out with desks in rows because I want them to understand their role individually in my classroom. And then once I feel, 2 weeks in, once we're done with kind of our first unit or the introduction unit, then I'll switch it up. But I always start with desks in rows, always.
And does that help you feel like, you can maintain control too of the classroom a little easier?
Yeah, because I just feel like desks in rows, the visual of it shows structure. And since I'm trying to implement structure, rows shows structure, in my opinion. And then of course I always go collaborative and I put stuff in groups or I'll have like weird V's and stuff. I'll, line my desks a whole bunch of different ways, throughout the year. But I want to start off showing that I am structured. This is our goal. I need you to get in line, and then it'll, be more fun later.
Kate.
Oh, sorry, Madeline, go ahead.
I just love how she said she uses the desks and rows to help the students figure out what their role is as individuals. And I think that's so important for first year teachers because yes, you're going to do group work and collaborative work and things like that. But starting it out, letting students know this is my job as an individual. And then 1 or 2 weeks in, when it's time for those things, then you let them know this is your job as a part of a group. If that's how you decide to flow it. I really like that, Kate.
And I think it's important to do that at all levels. I think a lot of people think at the high school level, they're mature and they should know and blah, 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 but they don't. And I mean, even in college classes, people don't pay attention. And if there's not structure, people take advantage of it. Every age needs structure. And so don't think at the high school level you can't start out with it because you should. The kids need it. They want it, even if they say they don't.
How important would you say is that first couple of weeks of school when you come in? How important are those first 2 weeks to setting the tone of a classroom?
It's absolutely critical. I mean, those first 2 weeks are when you set everything up. When you say, this is who I am. These are my expectations. This is who I need you to be, and you start to get things in line so that you can be successful for the next 8 months. It's huge.
We'll come back to that because you told us last time a story about how maybe you hadn't quite set it up the way you wanted to and had to kind of to reset everything. And we'll come back to it.
Yeah, I haven't quite figured that out yet.
let's talk about procedures now because the physical structure of the classroom obviously is going to, and procedures are as well. are going to be based on how you want the classroom to run. But you have to be, setting up desks, like how you're going to set them in rows or in pods. It seems like such a minute detail that a lot of people would just kind of skip over when you're talking about, teaching, new teachers how to do this, but it's not. It's a really important one. And so let's talk about like procedures. Like what kind of procedures would you institute at the elementary and in your elementary room, Madeline? Like, could you give us some examples of things that you have implemented that you think are really important?
Oh, yeah, for sure. So, with procedures, and in the book, we have a long list of procedures just to help you kind of think through what issues are going to come up. But in elementary, one procedure that's so important is like bathroom. What do you do when your students need to go to the bathroom? Mm-hmm. And so in my classroom, they cross their pointer finger and their middle finger to kind of make like an X. And they do it totally silently. And then they just hold it up in the air, and I either nod at them yes if they can go, or I shake my head no, like if we're in the middle of a lesson or if I really want them to get something finished before they go. And then I give them 2 passes, and they have a morning bathroom pass and an afternoon bathroom pass. And so they have, if it's between 8:30 and 11, they use the morning pass, they turn it into this little pass bin, then they can use the bathroom. Or if it's the afternoon, they do the second one. And slowly by the end of the year, I'm usually a little more flexible if they need to go more than twice during the day. But having that really tight procedure from the get-go helps them know, okay, we can only have one boy and one girl in the bathroom at the same time. You can't just walk out. Sometimes I'm going to say no, and that's okay. I'll let you go in 5 minutes whenever we're done. And it just helps prevent any issues, because the bathroom situation, it's something that just could turn into an issue, but it doesn't need to.
And do you teach kids, do you teach them this procedure on the first day of the crossing their fingers? And people can't see us, but this crossing of the fingers is almost like, when you tell a lie and you're crossing your fingers, right? And or whatever, and do you teach them that on the first day?
Yes. And so that's a good question, because I remember before I taught my first year, I was like, everyone's telling me to teach these procedures and have them practice it, but I don't understand like what I'm supposed to teach, when I'm supposed to teach it. But that first day, you do the things that they need to know on that first day. So I'm not going to teach them how to get out the crown bin unless we need to use the crown bin on the first day. And so the first day, the procedures, we practice lining up. We practice what we do for morning work. We practice going to the bathroom. We practice going to lunch, to recess, the things that are mandatory for the first day. And then the second day, you review those things you taught and practice the first day. And then if you need to, maybe add on, okay, today we're using pencil. So you add on, what do I do if I need my pencil sharpened? And then you slowly add on. And even if it's the last month and you're introducing a new procedure because you added some new piece of furniture in your classroom or something like that, and you do the same thing, you teach the procedure when you're going to need it, for sure.
So when you look at starting a new year or a new semester, or if you have new kids, does that how it work for you? Do you have new kids after a semester, or do you have them for the whole year?
The whole year.
Okay, so for you, every new year, the very first day for you is a procedure practice day.
Yes, a lot of it. And it's also culture building, helping us all get to know each other, helping them get to know me as a teacher, making our classroom rules. But I mean, those first 2 weeks and up to a full month, especially with the younger kids, it's very procedure based, but it helps in the long run so much.
Yeah. And I said last time, even at the high school level, I'm going to steal that crossed fingers thing. I seriously think that is absolutely brilliant, because I can't tell you how many times I've been right in the middle of teaching something and a student blurts out to me, "Can I go to the bathroom?" And I'm right in the middle of teaching, and I have not come up with a creative way of fixing that problem yet. But that's absolutely brilliant. So I'm gonna take that. Katherine, how about you? What kind of procedures have you instituted in your room, or that you think if you were going to advise a new teacher, what kind of procedures should they institute at the high school level?
At the high school level, just because I teach math, it's not so much procedures, it's more expectations, I think. I don't have a procedure for going to the bathroom, but I have an expectation of how students are going to get to the bathroom, or let me know they have to go to the bathroom. But it's not like a procedure that we practice. It's just an expectation that, you're not going to go during full class note time. And that's just the expectation. Other than that, there's no real,
And how do you teach that expectation?
It's just the first day of school. I talk about it and then just constantly reinforce. Mm-hmm. So the first day of school, you always have your syllabus day or whatever. Mm-hmm. I try to make it a syllabus 10 minutes because a full hour of going over syllabus, is boring.
They already know you're going to hate your class, basically, is what it is.
Right. So I just go over the high points for 10 minutes and give them like a little brochure, that has it in it. And then just every day reinforce, if a kid asks to go to the bathroom, we talk about, okay, when are the times to do this? When are the times not to do this? But in high school, I only teach freshmen. And so those freshmen on the first day are like scared out of their minds, like ready to, just listen to anything you have to say.
Yes.
So usually whatever I say that first day, it sticks.
What other expectations other than bathroom expectations do you have of your high school students? So for example, let's say I'm coming in to teach my first high school class. I've never taught before, and I'm like, okay, Katherine, I don't know what expectations I should put that are just good expectations. What should they be?
I always have something on the board or on the projector. I have a projector that projects on the screen that lets either the kids know the materials they need that day or has a problem I want them to start on. Either way, there's something for them to do the second they get into class, whether it's get your homework out, have a pencil, make sure you have a calculator. That's still something they have to do. So the second the bell rings, I can walk in and we can get started.
So your first thing is, sorry, no, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I just want to make it clear that your first expectation is that they come in and there's something for them immediately to start doing.
Yep.
There's no time. There's no time to mess around or talk, or they've got to get going right away.
And they're in their seats working when I walk into the classroom. And I greet every student at the door. And so as I greet them, I can remind them, if it's a kid who I know I'm going to need to remind, you can remind them. But I always greet them at the door, and there's always something for them to do, either a list of things they need to do or something for them on the board so that they know the second I walk in, like I'm ready to go. That's just how I walk into the classroom. We're going. Here we go.
Okay, so there's the expectation of they come in, they get started right away. What other kind of expectations do you have?
So we are a one-to-one school. So every student has laptops. Which for
people that don't know, that means everybody has laptops. Okay, sorry.
Yes,
I was just trying to clarify.
Every student has laptops. And then, of course, high schoolers have cell phones too. Mm-hmm. And so I make an expectation that those are not visible during group class time unless I say, get out your cell phone for this or get out your laptop for this. Once it's individual work time, we talk about what that looks like and how to be a responsible adult with this technology and and work and expectations. What does that look like? How can you balance both? But when it's whole class time, there's no technology out. I'm not going to be on my cell phone, so you can't be on your cell phone.
How do you go about enforcing that? Is there like multiple? Do you have for this? I want to get specific on that because I think the cell phone or technology problem could be a lot of people's problem at the high school level. I know it's definitely one of mine that I deal with quite a bit.
Right.
And how do you, like, for example, my procedure, my expectation is I give them 3 warnings and then I confiscate. But after talking to you last time, I started to think, I think maybe 3 warnings is kind of a lot for high school kids.
Yeah. Well, it also just takes up so much of your time too.
Right.
I wouldn't want to try to keep track of 3, so if I have 1 warning and then if I see it again, I give them a choice. Mm-hmm. Either it goes away or I'm going to set it on my desk. That's just it.
Got it.
And they know, I'm not going to turn it into the office. They're going to get it back at the end of class. And I set all of that up front. And I feel like when you set up these expectations and rules, you have to set them up in a way that makes a kid think that they're in their best interest too.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I try so hard to tell them, I'm not taking your cell phone because I want to be mean. I'm taking your cell phone for the time being so that you can be a learner and so that we can get through this day and we can all be successful, and I'm going to give it back to you and I'm totally on your side, and that's what you have to do when you're introducing these things is it's not a punishment. I'm looking out for your best interest and what I think is best for you right now. And what is best for you right now is for you to not have this out because it's a distraction.
Madeline, you were saying yes. Could you say why you agree with that so strongly?
That just prevents a power struggle and it shows you really just care about the kids. See, sometimes you see teachers who they just they create this power struggle. They take the cell phone and because they think cell phones are evil, or because I don't know, for whatever reason, but it's not worth it. And it doesn't even matter, if you just take the cell phone away. And that's what I do. Like my kids, I don't have cell phone issues, but I have like trinket issues. They bring their latest like G.I. Joe, and I see them like secretly showing it to their friend in reading group. And I'm like, and I do exactly what Kate says. Hey guys, this is learning time. I'm going to set it on my desk. You can get it at the end of the day, but we just can't do it right now. And instead of being like, oh, I'm going to put it in my May box, so you can't see it until May. And then you get a parent phone call because the parent's mad that you took the kids G.I. Joe, or the kid starts crying, or they start yelling because they're never going to get their G.I. Joe back. Like, just keep small problems small, which I feel like is something we teach our kids, but like teachers also need to remember that too. And it can be tough. I get that.
Yeah. And I totally agree with Katherine when you were saying that. I was actually getting ready to say the same thing Madeline was, and anytime, not only in enforcing procedures and rules, I have found it's really important to try to explain everything I do in the context of why it's their best interest.
Yeah.
And why it's valuable to them. Like, for example, I'll give you just an example. I don't know if you guys do an initial assessment to collect data on your students. But, a lot of my students at the high school level, they'll go from class to class, and it's become a custom, basically. Kid will come into class, and basically the second day of school, and they understand that they're going to have to take this big test, which is going to, they've got to take this big test. A lot of them don't even know why they take it. A lot of them have no idea. So first of all, I go through and explain, look, if you went to the doctor, and you went into the doctor, what would they do? And they say, well, I mean, if you're sick, they're gonna do a checkup on you. And I said, okay, so they're gonna check you out and see if anything's wrong, like what's going on with you, and then they're gonna prescribe something to you, right? Or they're gonna give you some kind of treatment if you're sick. And they say, yeah. So I said, well, would it be good teaching for you? Would it be valuable to you if you went to the doctor and the doctor just came in, didn't look at you, and just said, here's a prescription for whatever medicine? It wouldn't be valuable. So it said, what we're doing right now as teachers, would it be valuable to you at all if when I came in here and I just saw you and I just started teaching right away, having no idea what you know and what you don't know? And then I say, by doing this, it's going to show me what you already know and what you don't know, and I can skip or I can lessen some of the stuff that you already know a lot, and I can focus more on things that you don't know. And when I explain that, a lot of kids are like, yeah, like that makes total sense. I feel like he's not wasting my time. And so I think when you do this with almost anything, if you can try to show why it's in their best interest. In fact, I even told them a story about a kid who came in and he did stellar on the initial assessment. I mean, just absolutely stellar, knocked it out. And I went to the office and said, hey, this kid doesn't need to be in this class. Get him out, And and he'd already taken the class once, which is why he already knew everything. You see what I'm saying? But it didn't make sense for him to retake it. So I sent him I went to the office and said, hey, he should be out of here. And then he came to me at the end of the year and he, thanked me for doing that. And that actually gets kids excited. Like, oh, if I do really well in this assessment, maybe I can get out of here,
Right.
But it gets them not only to perform well, but it shows why it's in their best interest. Right. So I think doing that with everything is really important. So, are there any other procedures that you think are really important for a new teacher to think about in their classroom?
I mean, for elementary, like turning in papers, turning in homework. What do you do if you need a pencil sharpened? Are really big, basic ones. What do you do if you need the scissors out, the crayons out? In elementary, you do reading groups. You need to teach them, okay, if I'm in reading group, what are you supposed to be doing? When can you come ask me a question? Those are pretty big ones for elementary.
Which seems small. They almost seem obvious, but when you start teaching, you'll realize nothing is obvious to them. Right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
I wrote this in our ebook on our site. A teacher told me when my student teaching, he said, if you think you're being too obvious, you should be more obvious. Which I thought was funny. Probably the best piece of advice I've ever heard for teaching. Katherine, anything to add on procedures that you think would be really important for a new teacher? At the high school level?
At the secondary level, it's super important to think about if a student's absent.
Yeah.
And I still have not perfected that, so don't ask me what strategies and tips.
No, I totally agree. Like, why is that such a pain for you?
Just because in math there's an assignment every day, and so I'm basically teaching a lesson and assigning something almost every single day.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I have to figure out, okay, well, how can I teach it to them and get them the assignment? And if they've missed 2 days and they've missed two, lessons and 2 assignments, and I can't teach it to them because I have to teach the whole class the 3rd day of stuff. And so, it's just like,
I have found the exact same problem. I actually told my kids this year, and I said, when we have a test coming up, I say, look, just be here for the test, because tracking you down afterwards is literally the bane of my existence. And I've said because they won't come to you. They're not going to come to you to say, oh, I missed my test. Can I make that up sometime? No, that's not going to happen.
Especially in math.
Especially in math. They will. Yes, exactly. And so you have to go find them, and finding and figuring out how to keep track of the kids that missed is really, really hard. I have found for like assignments and stuff, using an online platform, which I'm sure you guys do. Do you guys have an online platform at your school?
Yeah, we call it Blackboard.
Okay, so you guys use Blackboard. We use Google Classroom, but regardless, it's kind of the same concept.
It's similar.
Maybe obviously at the beginning of the year, possibly making those expectations clear that if you miss, you have. Do you put the assignment on Blackboard?
Yeah, but
they don't.
Kids all have
but they
computers,
still don't.
but then they're like, I've never. It's like April. They're like, I don't know how to print. I'm like, it's April. What have you been doing all year?
I totally understand. And maybe that's one of those things like with Madeline saying that you have to practice these little tiny details that you think maybe you would expect them to already get. I have this same thing. You're right. It'll be March or April, and I'll be like, okay, you need to get on Google Classroom to get this thing. I've been using it all year, and the kid's like, I've never once signed in. I'm like,
I'd ask kids, because we email all the time, and so I've asked kids, I'm like, email your teacher about your missing assignment, because we have homerooms, and so I check in with those kids.
Right.
And they're like, email, and I've literally had to help students compose emails before.
Oh, absolutely.
What they write is atrocious, and I'm like, that doesn't make sense, and you might want to put a period at the end of it.
And not even the writing, just like I've actually had to do the exact same thing, but just show them how to send an email. Not even the writing, like how do you even go to a web browser and pull up your email? And, it's one of those things that they just don't understand because maybe they never practice those procedures, especially if you haven't been one-to-one very long in your school, or kids don't have a lot of technological access, which at my school they actually don't. And in any time they have to do something like that, it's like a procedure you've got to consider and practice.
I'm going to have to do that this year. I need to remember. I need to remind myself. Take note.
No, I totally agree. I wish we could figure out a way to solve the test problem, though.
I know.
If I could figure that out, my life would be substantially better. And maybe somebody out there that like listens to this is like, oh, I've got a way you can fix this. Maybe, and if you hear this and you got a solution, you should send me an email, and I will.
Yeah, please hit me up.
and I'll tell Katherine and Madeline how to do it. Madeline, is that a problem at the elementary school level with kids missing and then having to get them to make up assignments and stuff?
It is, but it's so helpful because I have them the entire day. And so, the biggest pain, like Kate said, is reteaching. I'm always like, okay, when can I reteach this student these lessons? Mm-hmm. And it's kind of complicated to, keep track of every single, if a kid misses one day, then I need to reteach them math, reading, writing, Yeah. And so that turns into a huge issue. But luckily I have them the whole day. And so we can usually, finagle something.
Yeah, that's true. Katherine, on your Blackboard, do you put information on how, like for example, when you teach a lesson, like on what I do on my Google Classroom on my online platform is I put something that will teach the kids everything that I taught that day. So maybe it's a video. You could make a video of yourself teaching it, or maybe somebody online, like a Khan Academy video or something like that.
Yeah.
That teaches the exact same thing, and then you could put the assignment that basically it's it's their responsibility to now learn digitally because you're right, it's impossible, really. It really is almost impossible to go back and reteach them that stuff, especially if they miss multiple days.
2 years ago, I had flipped my classes, and so it was like the easiest thing of all time if a kid missed. I mean, it was like a dream. But this first year at the high school, I just wasn't as familiar with the curriculum and wasn't willing to jump in and do that. But yes, I've done that in the past where, I've created the videos and put them up there. There are times when I had a smart board, if I was actually teaching a lesson and I realized 3 kids were gone, I would just record it as I taught it. and the kids would be like, "Hey, we miss you," and then like we would do the lesson.
That's really cool. You would record the lesson as you taught it. How did you record it?
Through the smartboard. The smartboard records.
Oh, really? Okay, that's awesome.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah. So, hey, I'm gonna ask you a little bit about flipping your classroom. That's okay. Mm-hmm. I've thought about doing the same thing. You said it was really nice.
Oh my gosh, yes.
But let me ask: did your kids? And for those who don't know, flipping a classroom basically means why don't you describe how you flipped it? Like, what does that mean in the context of your math class?
Yeah. So I took these lessons that would take 30 minutes to teach in class, and I tried to make a video that was less than 10 minutes that had key concepts, whatever. And then I would record them, and my students, that was their homework. Or just whenever they had free time, then, before class, whether it was that morning or, whenever they had free time to watch the video and take notes. And that was their grade, was taking notes. They got like a 3-2-1-0 grade. Either they did it all, they did it partially, or they need to go finish, And so they came in, and then the very first thing on the board was then a practice problem. And so they could look through their notes and see if they could figure out how to do the practice problem. And then we would talk about it and make sure everyone kind of understood. Then we would do like one more together, maybe two more together. And then I would assign the homework, and we worked on it in class. So it wasn't homework anymore. It was called practice.
Right.
And so then I could literally just touch base with every single kid like multiple times. And I knew by the end of the period, oh my gosh, they've got it. They can do it.
And did you have a lot of problem with kids just not doing the stuff at home, just not watching the video or not taking the notes?
Sometimes, but then the videos were so short that I would just send them out in the hall, that first bit of class, and they wouldn't get their credit for watching the notes. They wouldn't get their 100%, but that was their choice to make. And so it would take them, 10 minutes to watch the video, which is when we're doing our practice problems. So then they'd come in usually once we're done with the practice problems, and then we're all still practicing the practice together, like the homework together. And so they really didn't miss a ton.
I see what you're saying.
And it wasn't that much of a pain. So their consequence was they wouldn't get the grade. However, they still got all the learning. And so it was like it was a dream.
Okay, so when just to dial down some specifics, so when they came in the room, obviously you have a problem. They start off right off the bat. Now, are you grading their notes as they're doing that problem?
Yeah.
So that way you can very quickly assess whether or not that they have actually watched the video at home.
Yep. And so I would just make check marks. And sometimes the video I would have like a question they had to answer. Like it'd be like after example number 2, and I'd be like, what's your favorite candy? And if they wrote it down, then that was a super easy way to see like, oh, they did watch to this point, and they listened at this point, and they, you know what I mean?
Did you use Edpuzzle for that?
No, I would just ask the question and say, under example number 2, I want you to write this.
There's a really great resource called Edpuzzle, where you can either make your own videos or use videos from YouTube or whatever you want to use. And you can put questions in the video, and it pops up as they go. And I think if I ever decide to flip a classroom, I would do almost the exact same thing you did. And I've considered it when and if my school does go 1-to-1. So, but obviously it's not for everybody, especially if schools aren't if kids struggle doing things at home, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I was just curious what kind of experience you had with that.
I loved it. And I'm going to do it with my Algebra 2 honors class this upcoming year. But not quite yet with my other classes. I don't know if they're ready.
Okay, so we've already kind of talked about procedure structures, and we've actually already talked about a lot of the rules that you guys have in your classrooms and how you set them up. So let's talk about, we've been talking about a little bit about classroom management and the importance of it. You lay out basically the 3 factors in managing a classroom well that, and here's what they are. Can we talk more about those 3 things? The 3 things that are the 3 factors in managing a classroom well. So if you want to be able to manage a classroom, you need to know these 3 things.
Yes. So in the book, we use a metaphor for a house to represent the 3 things. And the 3 things are relationships, high and clear expectations, and consistency. And so if you can picture a house in your head, relationships are the foundation. And that's what the foundation is solid, and it's there on your great days. But then it helps the house stay firm, when a giant thunderstorm is coming in. And that is so true in the classroom as well. Relationships help make your great days better, but when you bomb a lesson, if you have relationships, it's going to be okay. And every day is a new day. And then high and clear expectations is the house itself. And that decides, and you want your house to look nice and orderly. And so think about what you want your class to look. And I always use the example, if you're a first grade teacher and you call a student to the carpet, or you call your students to the carpet, you want to give high and clear expectations. You don't just want to say, okay, everybody, it's time to come to the carpet, because then you have no idea what it's going to actually look like. But if you say, okay, everyone, we're going to come to the carpet in a quiet way. When you get to the carpet, I want you to sit in this specific spot with your body in this, in crisscross applesauce, or however you want them to sit. That helps. That really hones in on what those high and clear expectations are to help your classroom look like what you want it to look like. And then finally is the consistency. And the consistency is like when you call in the plumber when there's a leaky faucet in your house. And that's the same thing you do in your classroom. So if an issue is occurring, that's when you bring in a tweak, or you make sure that you don't just have students come to the carpet quietly once. You make sure you're consistent about it. You have them do that every single time. And so that helps you take care of your own house, but then you also then call in the plumber or call in the handyman when an issue occurs to keep your house or keep your classroom looking like you want it to look.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So the three things, just to reiterate, are the relationships, which are the foundation, the high and specific expectations. And I think most teachers are trying to have high expectations, but we talked about this last time, is that a lot of teachers forget to be highly specific in their expectations. Like you said, if you want them to come up to the front of the classroom, you need to verbalize that you want it in a quiet way, with their body facing a certain way. Again, almost being too specific, because if you don't verbalize exactly how it's supposed to be, it will not be nearly the way you imagined it to be, or the way that it should be. And then lastly, the last thing is consistency. Continually doing the same thing over and over again. Katherine, at the high school, or at the secondary level, high school level, how important do you think that those things are? What do you think of those three is probably the most important in managing a classroom for you? Sorry, it's a tough question.
I know they're all really important. I guess maybe relationships, but a piece of me almost wants to say the high and clear expectations. Mm-hmm. But they go hand in hand, I think. Right. Yeah. They're
all kind of woven together as being really important. Yeah. I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
So for people, you're saying that if their classroom's not managed well, they're probably lacking in one or more of those three areas. Would you say?
Oh yeah. Actually, I'm going to say it's expectations. It's definitely high and clear expectations. That is. Yep. That's it.
And why?
Because I had phenomenal relationships with my kids my first year, and my classroom was out of control.
Interesting. So okay, that makes sense. So your relationships could be great with them, but
they were so good.
Mm-hmm, yeah. I can agree with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then again, if you had not had those relationships, when you go to tell your story later about how you reset your classroom, maybe that would not have worked without those initial relationships in the first place.
No, and that's totally possible, but it started to then be able to actually function because of my high and clear expectations. And think about it. If a teacher is the worst teacher of all time, but they have high and clear expectations, it doesn't matter if their relationships are good. The kids still have to follow the rules or they get sent to the office. You know what I mean?
I think
it doesn't mean they're effective or good.
I think they're all three equally important because there are so many teachers who have high and clear expectations, but then the kids don't care because the teacher doesn't show that they care about the student. And so I just think it's tough to say which one do you think is most important, because I think that's why in the book we included all three, because if you lose one, then you lose it all.
Right. Yeah. I totally agree. I was giving you I guess that's a poor question. They say if you ask better questions, you get better answers. Right. But no, I agree. And let's talk a little bit about relationships. We talked about this last time about how you can foster good relationships in a classroom. And because Madeline, you say you have 30 students, almost 25 students?
Yeah, I would have 25.
Yeah, 25 students. You have them all year, and those are the only 25 you have. And then Katherine, at the high school level, we may have 125 throughout a semester, right? So how do we, what kind of different things do you do to foster those relationships? And let's start at the elementary school level, Madeline, with you. What kind of things try to be as specific as you can. Like, what's something that you can think of that like helps you build a relationship with maybe a student?
Mm-hmm. So when you're in elementary, you can build relationships quickly, but then because you have the same students and all the students are together the whole year, you can have lots of issues within those relationships, in February when everyone's just kind of sick of each other. Mm. And so I think at the beginning of the year, when you're just trying to build those relationships, specific things are just your tone when you're talking to your students. Mm-hmm. A lot of people are like, oh, it's when you go and you ask them, about their home life. It's like, yes, those conversations slowly, naturally happen, but it's not the first day and you pull a kid to the side just to be like, okay, tell me about yourself. The first month as a new teacher is crazy. So just start simple. Just start being really respectful to them when you speak to them. And once students realize that like you care about them just in the way that you talk to them, that's it. That's leaps and bounds ahead of other teachers because you are treating them with respect. So for specific examples, like greeting them when they come in, instead of going and talking in the pod to your teacher friends, which is fine. We all do it. There are totally days when that happens, but especially that first month you're standing at the door and you're saying, good morning, Trevor. I am so happy to see you this morning. Mm-hmm. And then when you go in, we have morning circles. And so in the morning you ask just general questions. Tell me what your favorite color is and why. And that sounds dumb, and when you intently listen to each student as they share, it shows that you care about them. So those are two very specific ways, but like so important ways at the beginning that I foster those relationships. But then at the end of the year, because we've been together for so long and because everyone's sick of each other, that's when you really need to bring in that problem solving, and you need to show students, when you can just tell there's tension. I have another circle, and we talk about, okay, what just happened? Why did it happen? We're a family. We know that we care about each other. And then you teach students the language, how to problem solve through those tough situations. So then you can stay cohesive even at the end.
Can I comment on what you said at the beginning about tone? One of the first things in my student teaching, I realized when I started teaching in my student teaching, I noticed I was almost talking at my class and not really talking with them. And it seems like it's a very small difference, but it's a big one. I noticed like I'd be teaching and I'd be like almost just talking at a classroom, not really specifically to anybody. And now I really try to make a concerted effort to pay attention to the tone of my voice, because the tone in your voice does change when you're specifically talking at a general area as opposed to like a person. And so I try to kind of make eye contact with people as I'm talking, and it actually forces me to my tone to change, almost like I'm in a conversation. And that I've noticed makes a lot bigger difference compared to when I started teaching. And that's a small little thing, but it was important for me anyways. So yeah, I agree with you on tone. How about at the high school level, Katherine, about with 125 students you have coming in every semester, how do you try to foster relationships?
You got to start small. I agree with Madeline about greeting your students every day. I try really, really hard to do that. Joke with them as they come in, ask them how their day's going. If they're wearing, some sports teams memorabilia, I'll talk to them about, just anything to like have a teeny bit of conversation with them. Can
I ask you about that real quick?
Yeah.
Because I'll try to do the same thing. I'll try to greet my students at the door, but I notice like they're all coming in so fast and I can't greet them all. Do you greet every student, or do you just greet the ones that you can kind of get your hands on at the time?
I mean, I try to say hi to everyone individually, but so I teach, my classes are small though. Mm-hmm. They're specifically small because I'm teaching the struggling of the struggling. Mm-hmm. So, I'm greeting 16 kids coming in and not 30.
Sure.
But I do try to get as many as I can, and some sneak in. But then so I've done this a lot too. I'll walk into the class and I'll be like, oh my gosh, how did you sneak in past me? I didn't even see you.
Yeah.
And I'll acknowledge them. And so really trying to hit every kid as they come in, not physically, but make sure you have some sort of interaction.
We can't do that anymore.
No. It is legal in Missouri though.
Is it really?
It really is. Yeah.
It's legal in Missouri. You can hit kids in Missouri?
in the state of Missouri, but then each school board has adopted a policy saying like, don't.
Okay.
But
So I see. Okay.
The state has not.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, how can I move down to Missouri and get my pass the praxis down there? No.
Yeah. So I definitely greet all of my students, and then what the other thing I try to do is just praise as much as I can. Especially in a math class, to just build like security and safeness. If they get one step correct, I praise them for it. If they get a problem correct, I praise it for it. If they're first one done, I praise it for them. If they're the last one done, but they finally did get it done, I praise them for it.
Yeah. Right.
And it's just any positive interactions that you can have with them, build a relationship, even if you don't know anything about them.
Yeah, I totally agree. And when it comes to the praise thing, we talked about this last time also. I mentioned how maybe calling home, experience I had when I called home to a parent and I just told them, hey, your daughter is doing a great job right now. She's killing it in the class. She's doing awesome. And her dad was like, really? She's never liked history before. She's never been, she's never really done that good in it before, so why, I was like, I don't know why she's doing so well, but she's doing a great job, and she came the next day, and she goes, I heard what you said to my dad. And from there on, we had an amazing relationship the rest of the time. And she was always my most active student, always trying to answer questions. And it was just one of those things that was like, I really should have done that probably more now that I think back, on it.
I always do it with the kids I'm the most nervous about. Like I remember like 2 or 3 weeks in, I was like, oh gosh, this kid is going to be, if I can't build a relationship with him, we are in trouble. And he did something really great one day. And so I called home, talked to his mom, and I was like, this is so great. And we had the best relationship all year. And who knows if it's because of that? I don't know. But it was like, if I can try to get in there before this gets bad, I want to.
Yeah, and I've struck up relationships with students that I thought could be a problem right off the bat. Like this year, for example, my third trimester, I had a student come in that I had known about from other teachers and other stuff. And man, we hit it off right away. I don't know what happened, but here's the thing: we had a great relationship, but I was still unable to. I don't want to use the word save him. But he got to the point near the end of the trimester, and he just gave up, and there was nothing I could do. I mean, I pulled him out. We had a long conversation. I was like, man, look, just do what you've got to do to get through, just get through. Yeah. Don't do this again. You hate doing this, right? Yeah. Well, just get through. Do what you've got to do to get through. Class isn't hard. Here's exactly what you got to do just to make it. And he just didn't do it, even though we had a great relationship. And he caught me later on and at the end of the school year, and he goes, he's like, I was going through some stuff at the time, and I should have just did what you said. And he's like, I'm redoing the class now online. He's like, I should have just done what you said, but sometimes, you just got to realize, like, sometimes that's just going to happen. Some students, you may have a great relationship with them, but they're not all going to do what you hope they do, even if you have that great relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I agree.
Madeline, anything else on relationships that you can think of that's really important?
I don't think so. Mm-mm.
Awesome. So let's talk about some other stuff real quick. We talked about classroom management already and stuff, but that really wasn't my biggest struggle at the beginning of the school year. It was constantly planning lessons all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know about you guys, but when I start talking to other teachers, they say, gosh, I'm just constantly planning and I'm spending hours. I know I was spending 2-3 hours every single night planning lessons. What would you tell new teachers before they start that grind of lesson planning?
Use your resources. Do not reinvent the wheel yet. Use this first year to develop who you are as a teacher and to really, really learn your curriculum backwards and forwards. And if that means doing the most boring way of teaching of all time to get through the year, then that means doing the most boring way of teaching of all time to get through the year. But I think, I remember Madeline said this, find one thing every lesson that can spark either your interest or their interest, and just keep it small. Mm-hmm. It's a grind. Your first year is going to be a grind. And so don't feel like you have to be this immaculate, fabulous, wonderful teacher your first year, because I don't know anybody who was one.
Yeah, Madeline, how about you?
I agree. Just don't be afraid. I remember in undergrad, sometimes my professors and like my classmates would kind of make us scared of, the curriculum. Oh, these, giant monster money makers make these terrible curricula and blah, 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 blah. And it's true. Most of the curriculum that I get, I'm not in love with, but use it. There's no reason not to. If it's going to hit all the standards, you should use it. And if you're in a situation without a curriculum, or if you even want more, even though you have a curriculum, just Google it. I've Googled so many things, so many people, especially now with the Common Core state standards. Even if your state isn't a Common Core state, a lot of times, at least in elementary, the standards are fairly similar. And so you can find teachers who have made really detailed and great lessons already. And you don't, like Kate said, you don't have to reinvent the wheel yet. Wait until, and if you want to, you do one unit and design it and make it extra special. We're not saying to not do it. We're just saying don't push yourself so hard that you're losing your personal life because of it.
Yeah. We talked about this last time too, about how it seems like there's just such pressure on teachers to be like innovative all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how I felt. I mean,
there is.
And maybe it's pressure on myself, but I think it's coming from outside somewhat too.
It is.
That every teacher should be like, try to be innovative, and the reality of being in your first year, maybe even your second year, or, sometimes even your third year, it's like, maybe, you're not there. You're not ready to innovate, to really innovate yet. And sometimes you can take this old curriculum, like you said, Madeline, and by curriculum, you mean like resource worksheet books and the textbook.
Basil Reader.
Yeah. Things like that. That's what the stuff you're talking about. Right. And you can use that material, but sometimes it's just being really you, like your real personality that brings kids into it. Like that's often, sometimes that makes it even better. You can use that stuff, but it's just the way you give it to students can still be really positive, even if it's not innovative.
I agree.
No, that's awesome. So when it comes to lesson planning, is there anything else that you guys do to kind of like cut down on the time that you have spent lesson planning? Because I know some people are spending so much time doing that. Is there anything?
Yeah. Just as you go on and as you learn the curriculum and you learn your standards, just be purposeful about finding ways to do things faster. Will really help you in the long run. And luckily, even just once, like just because something is slow the first time you do it doesn't mean it's still going to be slow the 10th time you do it. So just keep practicing. But then if it's still slow the 10th time you do it, then try to find a different way to do it. Just remember that those first couple months, it is just going to be time consuming, but it doesn't mean it's going to be forever. Yeah. Once your brain and your muscles get that working or get that muscle memory going, it'll really help the grades. It'll really help whatever's being really time consuming.
Let's move to, that's great. Let's move to another question here. We talked about the importance of building relationships with students, but in your guys' book, you actually talk about building relationships with coworkers and administrators. What kind of things can you do to ensure that those relationships are positive and beneficial to everybody? Does anybody want to tackle that question first?
Sure. I think you just need to start off your first year and just take your time. I think you just need to take your time. I think you need to take your time to get to know everybody, get to know strengths, get to know weaknesses, get to know their style in and outside of the classroom, and just kind of be a sponge. Just kind of absorb everything that's happening around you. And don't rush into feeling like you need to become best friends with everyone in your building or your administrator from the very beginning. Because your job is not to be your coworker's best friend. Your job is to be a teacher. And so I think it's very important to just take your time and kind of get to know your culture and your climate within your building before you, make any big commitments in terms of friendships and relationships.
What about
I think also...
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Madeline.
Just to add on to that, just always be kind and positive the whole time. So even if you're taking your time, you're not, hiding in a corner and, looking at everyone suspiciously. Just take your time, but be positive and kind. Be there, be present, be excited. People love new teachers because they bring energy and excitement. And so as you're figuring out and navigating, just make sure you're being a positive addition to whatever environment you're put into. Yeah.
I would like to add something that we didn't talk about last time, but it goes along with what you're saying, Madeline, about being positive. I would say be really careful of what you criticize. For example, when I was student teaching, I was with my mentor teacher, and there was something about a test or a curriculum or like a unit we were teaching. I can't remember the details of it, but I made mention that I thought maybe this part could be a little bit better, right? I didn't say it was bad. I just said I thought this could be better, like, you know what I mean? And he kind of stopped me right there, and he goes, all right, he goes, pay attention to what you're criticizing for a second. All this was written together by every teacher from the department. So when you start to criticize something like that, like, for example, we used like department curriculum across curriculum, like we all used it together, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, basically right now what you're criticizing is what X teacher did.
Yeah. And
he almost seemed to take a little offense to it, and I was not trying to be offensive at all. I was just saying, I feel like I could maybe make this better. And but I hadn't even thought about that I was maybe criticizing someone who had made that before in the past. And obviously, as a student teacher, I didn't know anything compared to these veteran teachers who had been doing this for a long time. So I would definitely say be really careful of what you criticize.
Yep. I had a practicum teacher who did something similar to that.
Interesting.
It was my third year of teaching, and 2 English teachers had come in because they'd created a rubric, and they wanted a math teacher's perspective about, do you think a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 scale makes sense? So I was like, well, tell me about what you're doing. So they were just explaining. I had said no opinion, nothing. And he's sitting watching and interrupts them. And he goes, I think it's stupid that it's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Why wouldn't you make it 3 through 0? And we all just were like, you are a practicum teacher. They're not done explaining their part. I have not said anything, and it was just like the wrong time. So inappropriate. That kind of
and people will be more offended by things than you would think that they would be often.
Yeah. And it's also just how you deliver, and and I think the first year, if somebody asks for your opinion, give it. But so much of the time, like, you don't know what they've been working on for 15 years to develop. You don't understand the structure of the schedule and why it is the way that it is. You don't understand what this committee is about truly. And so it's just scary. It's just weird. It's just a weird dynamic that first year. It's kind of scary.
Yeah. No,
but then I also don't want first year teachers to be afraid to ever say anything that may be challenging, and I think it's all also about the way you say it.
Yeah,
if you look at this and you're like, wow, this lesson's terrible. I can't believe it's in the curriculum. Probably not the best direction. But if you're like, I really like these parts of it. Has anyone ever, like, would it be okay if I did this additionally? Or like, be like, I saw, when I was student teaching, my mentor teacher did this. What do you guys think of that? Is that something you do? Like, you're presenting ideas, but asking for their opinion with them. So it's not you just being like, I'm going to do this because this is what my mentor teacher did, and this is what research says, and blah, 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 blah. You're saying it, throwing it out there, getting their opinion. And if they shoot it all down, then you're like, perfect. I trust you because obviously you guys have so much more experience than I do.
Right.
And so it's all just about, because I feel like new teachers get hired because people want those new ideas. And so don't be afraid to share them or ask questions. But like you both have said, just it's all delivery and how you say it.
It is. It's like I've noticed that it seems like with teachers, it's the language between teachers is certainly a language of subtlety, I think. That is almost hard to really describe. I don't know how many times have you ever got an email that went out and someone criticized that email, said they should have used this word instead of the other word, or something like that. It's interesting how subtle the language could be. So I would say, just like what you guys said, be careful with that. Let's go back to relationships for just a second, and let's tell Katherine. I'm going to let you tell your reset story.
Oh, goodness gracious!
So you told us a story in the beginning about something called the reset button, which is in your book.
Yes.
And tell us a story about how you went first of all, tell us what the reset button is.
Okay, so there's 2 things that every teacher can do to just fix little things that are going on in their classroom. We call one thing the tweak, and then we call something else the reset. And tweak is what people do every single day, all the time. I mean, you tweak your lesson constantly, whether you know you're doing it or not, or you tweak your interactions with students, whether you know you're doing it or not.
Effective teachers do.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yes.
You're writing with the green marker, and all of a sudden you realize the kid in the 3rd row can't see the green marker, so you pick up the black one instead. That's a tweak, that you've changed or whatever. But But a reset is when literally things are falling apart and you have to just reset everything about your classroom that exists, or almost everything about your classroom that exists. And you can only really do it once a year, because if you do it more than once a year, you've kind of lost credibility a little bit. But I think you have one shot to truly say, this isn't working, we're going to change it, and let's do it. And so I had to do that my first year of teaching.
So tell us the story.
So it was October, and slowly things had kind of fallen out of control. And I just remember trying to get through this lesson one day, and kids were just shouting out answers left and right. And so I was like, what is going on? How do I get them to stop doing this? And then I look up, and there's a line of kids waiting to sharpen their pencils. There's 4 kids in line, and one of them doesn't even have a pencil. He has a pen, and I know he has a pen because it's the one I gave him, and then I look over, and a kid is getting up to throw something away, which, why do you need to throw something away? We're taking notes. But he gets up to throw something away, and then he hits a kid on his way back to the trash can. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. This is literally, we are out of control.
In fairness, that sounds like control for a lot of teachers. I just want to you know what I mean? That would be a nice change for some, I'm sure.
For my mental stability, and
yes,
for me, I could not handle it anymore. And I'd been patient, and I'd been kind, and I didn't know what to do anymore. I didn't know how to get them to focus. I didn't know how to get them to stay seated. I didn't know how to get them to be quiet. I didn't know how to get them to care. So
what did you do?
Well, I called my mom and cried.
Step 1, call mom and cry.
And then I just kind of sat down, and I was like, okay, what are the things that are bothering me? Well, it bothers me when kids shout out. It bothers me when kids get out of their seat without asking for no reason. It bothers me that people feel like they can get up and sharpen their pencil whenever they want, even if they don't have to sharpen their pencil. I remember being that 5th grader who would just get up because I was bored and go sharpen my pencil. I did that, and I knew that's what my kids were doing to me, and it made me mad.
Right.
And so I realized that I had...
Sorry, so you made an intentional list of all the things that you were struggling with at the time.
Super intentional.
Okay, that's really important. We didn't talk about that last time, really, I don't think much. But that's really important. Before you do this, you got to make a very, very clear and intentional list of things that are problems for you.
Yes, and we talk about it in the book.
Okay.
You have to figure out what is the true issue and what needs to change in order for all of this to be successful. So I made a list of the true issues and what needs to change, and I came back the next week on Monday, and I was open with my class. I told them, I was like, guys, things aren't great. I go, and part of it's my fault and part of it's your fault, but we're going to work together and we're going to fix it together, and it's going to be good. I was like, because we have to learn this year. And right now I just don't feel like we're learning to the best of our ability. And it's, partially my fault. So I've come up with these new things that we're going to do. And I went extreme, probably way more. No, you have to, if you're going to do this reset, you have to go extreme. So yes, you have to go extreme. And I, made it, I was like, right now we're going to have this rule that you can't get out of your seat ever. And they were like, and I was like, I've already come up with a solution for all of it. Don't worry. I go, if you need to sharpen your pencil, I'm going to do it for you. If you need to throw something away, I will bring you the trash can. And literally that's just what I did for a month or, maybe even 2. But if I hadn't done that, there's no way we would have made it to May successfully at all.
So obviously you said one problem was students getting out of their seats. So you made the solution, no one can ever get out of their seat, but you gave the caveat, if you needed to do something, I will do it for you.
Yep.
So passing papers in, for example, you had them give the papers to you to turn in or something like that, instead of them going and turning it in or whatever the case. Okay.
And so they knew the second they got into my classroom and they sat down, their butt was glued to that desk until they left.
And that was effective for you.
Yeah.
What other things did you try? So getting up out of seats was one problem. What was another problem you said you had? Shouting out answers, right?
Shouting out answers. And so
how did you fix that?
Oh my goodness. I remember the very first day I implemented these rules, kids shouted out answers, and I was like, no, but I said that you cannot speak unless you have raised your hand and I've called on you, no matter what it's about. You cannot speak. And so I had the consequence, and I gave them a warning because I was like, I understand it's the first day, but then a girl, she did it again. And I was like, you're going to have to move to the safe seat. I was like, this is our new rule. This is our new expectation. And until we all learn it, I'm going to have to be strict about it. And they did it.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. And about going extreme as well, like just being almost over the top. And I shared a story with you guys last time that I'm not going to share this time. But Madeline, do you have anything to add to the reset button?
Also, just remember, as elementary or even in secondary, you may not need, like, there's a chance that there's a secondary teacher who only needs to reset like their U.S. history class. They don't need to reset their government class. Or in elementary, like my first year, I needed to reset my 60-minute math block, but my guided reading and writing lessons were going totally fine. And so when you reset, it may not even be, oh my gosh, my whole entire day is just out of control. It may be a specific part, and it's still called a reset, and you still do the exact same things, but then like I would let my kids know, okay, math time is over, so we can go back to whatever my normal expectations are.
Gotcha. So teachers out there, new teachers, it's okay to totally fail the first time.
Yes. You'll fail a lot. I still fail a lot.
So before we end this conversation off, one of the other things that teachers ask a lot, other than, how do I, cut down my lesson planning, and how do I grade fast, and how do I manage my classroom? The other thing is, how do I balance my work and my life schedule together? How do you guys go about managing that? I know, Katherine, I know you said you had some things that you do to kind of manage that.
Yeah. So my first year of teaching, I was literally at school from 6 to 6 every day until probably the
12-hour
spring. Yeah. And so I finally cut myself back, and I was like, I can't keep doing this. Like, this is exhausting. I am killing myself. And so I still get to school at 6:30ish. I love being there early. That's just how I am. That's my work time. That's my me time.
So hang on, you're a math person and a morning person.
I am not a morning person. I have forced myself to become.
I was going to say you're an alien.
And I'm not a math person either. I think I forced myself to become one of those too.
Okay, so you still get there early.
I still get there very early, but then because I work so much in the morning, I then allow myself, like, for sure, I'm out of there by 5. But if it gets 4 and I can tell I'm kind of clocking out, I will allow myself to leave at 4 because I know I'm going to come in early and get whatever I need to get done that next morning. But I try to, just because the evening is kind of time to unwind. It's still sunny outside. You can go get dinner with a friend or something if you want to. You can work out. And so I really try to end at 4 or 5 before it gets too late. And I savor the evenings for myself.
Madeline, how about you?
One thing that I do that I started doing this last year was my first year, I would just make a to-do list, and it would be like 15 things long. And I would get so anxious and overwhelmed. And like, Kate, you're logging 11, 12, 13-hour days. But then this year I started doing a what do I need to survive today list, and then what do I need to get done by the end of the week list. And it was still on the same piece of paper, but it helped me prioritize. So if it's after school and I've gotten through all my what I need to get through today list, then maybe I can get ahead on my rest of the week list. Or if it's after school and I'm melting and I only have 2 things I need to do on my get done today list, then I can just get through those things and then go home and know that I have everything I need to be able to survive the next day. And that's how I get through my really tough weeks. And then there are some weeks where I've been able to plan ahead far enough that it's not very stressful, but I found that helps that 15 item checklist get down to much more reasonable and seems doable checklist.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And being highly organized about that's really, really important too. I noticed in my first year that the same thing. I actually did a whole presentation on this at a conference in Indianapolis early this year, early educator conference, about essentially the ritual you kind of have to set up in your first year. And it does almost need to be like a ritual, because I was doing the exact same thing as you, Madeline. I was creating these lists, and I started to notice that on my lists there were categories. Everything fit into a category. And I noticed there was essentially 5 categories that I was fitting. So in our ebook that we wrote, we put this ritual in. So I'll tell you the five things. And it goes in this order for me. Right at the end of the day, when the bell rings at the end of the day, I have these 5 categories of things I have to complete. And we call it the 5 Ps, because all of them start with a P. And it's the first one is post grades. So that means grading and posting the grades. I always do that absolutely first. Parent contact. Then I go and print any materials, like you said, Madeline, whether it's for that day or it's for the week or whatever the case is. I go and print my materials. Then I plan a lesson if I need to. And then the last thing I do before I leave the room is I pencil in my agenda for the next day. So I'm not a morning person like Katherine. So I do it before I come in, and it's already up. It's already ready to go. And so those 5 things, pretty much everything I do, I notice for the most part fits into those categories. Rather so as grading, parent contact, printing materials, planning lessons, and putting up your agenda. Those are like the things that keep me alive. Like that's the lifeblood of my of my teaching. And so I put that in the book as well. And I totally agree. Is there anything else that you can think of? Like, so setting those rules for yourself are really important. So how many hours a day do you think you clock now, Katherine, compared to what you did when you started? You say you stop at like 4 now, 4 or 5 maybe at the latest?
Yep. I would say 4. I would say 4 is usually where I'm done. So I still clock 10 hours, 9.5 maybe.
So is the 10, 11, 12 hour day in your first year just inevitable? Is it an inevitable thing? Is it something we can kind of not avoid totally, but like we can kind of limit?
I don't know. For me, I couldn't, but I'm like a worrier. Like I worried so much about making sure all my grades are accurate. All my lessons were, I would practice, some problems I would practice like 4 times to make sure I could explain it as thoroughly as I wanted to explain it. And I think I was just, and I still am, I'm super, super meticulous. But now I really, really, really know my curriculum. And so I don't have to be as meticulous. My lessons are made. I know how to do all the problems. I don't have to practice all my problems. I don't have to make answer keys anymore. I don't have to do any of that. In my first year, I had to do all of that. And that's just, for me, being math and being meticulous, it just, I don't know how I could have avoided it, to be honest.
Sure. And how about you, Madeline? Is there anything that you think, if you were going to give advice to a new teacher to kind of limit the amount of work that they're doing in their first year, is there anything that you would tell them?
Just be aware of yourself and see, there had been a month where I went in every single Sunday for 5 hours, and it was the end of October, and I was like, I can't do this. I'm starting to resent school. I'm starting to not be excited to see my kids. Like, I can tell I'm pushing myself to the limit. And so because I was aware of myself, then I reconfigured things and decided, okay, do I want to bring this stuff home? Or I realized there were some things I was doing over the weekend that it wasn't even on my need to do this week list. It was on my, I kind of want to do this project eventually list, which you realize your first year, unless you just have the space for that, which you might, it's not mandatory. And I had to acknowledge to myself, this is not mandatory. And that really helped me just set up some parameters.
Right. I totally agree. Guys, this was really awesome. I'm very thankful that you guys decided to come back and give me your time, even after it was it didn't go well the first time. It went well the first time. We just didn't record it the first time. So thank you guys for coming on today. I really appreciate it. I'm sure people will gain so much from listening to this, and I really do hope people go out and get your book on Amazon, which there will be a link to in the show notes, or I guess you're going to have it at Barnes & Noble now, right, too?
Yeah, it'll be at over 600 Barnes & Noble locations, which is exciting.
That is awesome.
Yeah, and it's on Amazon, Your First Year. And they can also contact us on Twitter if they would like to.
And before we leave off, can you tell people your Twitter handles, Katherine?
Sure. Mine's, and I use it for my classroom too. I would tweet out videos. So mine's more teacher-ish. It's at Miss Whitaker, MissWhitaker. And then my room number, 294.
Gotcha. And Madeline?
Mine is at M Whitaker, WHITAKER _ED. So M Whitaker Ed.
Awesome. Guys, thanks. This was really awesome.
Thank you.
All right. Talk to you later.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
All right. And there you have it. Obviously, I highly recommend you pick up their book. Again, go to Amazon. The link will be in the show notes. Please pick that up because I think it's a highly valuable resource. And even if you're someone who thinks you know all these things, maybe you're an older teacher, maybe you're a veteran teacher, and you just happen to be listening to this, pick up the book or recommend it to a newer teacher or a friend, someone that you think that could learn from it. That's what this is really all about. So for today, I'll leave you with that. And until next time, try not to be tardy.